Did you take your ibuprofen at school before you left?
No.
No?
Oh, yeah.
You did. You should have at 1 o'clock. When Owen was very young, he would get strep throat a lot, 12 times in 14 months. And every time he got strep, he didn't run a fever. He never complained of a sore throat, but his behaviors would get strange.
Sometimes it makes me normal, and then sometimes I'm really just not me.
My name is Maria Wilson, and my husband Phil and I have a son. He's 9.5, Owen, and Owen was diagnosed with PANDAS last September. He had tics that were reoccurring, 30 or 40 times a minute. He couldn't focus. He lost most of his executive functioning abilities. He was struggling.
I'm an integrative physician specializing in PANS PANDAS. The letters stand for pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcus. And it is a disorder where strep infection triggers inflammation in the brain, causing neurologic and psychiatric symptoms. PANS is a condition, pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. And it's very similar to PANDAS, but in that case, other kinds of infections such as influenza or Lyme can be the trigger for it. Generally, the onset for PANDAS and PANS is very acute. So the phrase we'll hear over and over again from parents is, my child went to bed themselves and woke up a different person. It was like someone else was in my child's body.
Owen is very bright. He is very energetic, creative. He loves music. He likes Legos. He loves to build and create anything out of anything.
In a mild case, the child might have a few tics, some mild anxiety, trouble focusing. At the most severe end of the spectrum, you're going to see kids who are jumping out of moving cars and out of windows at their houses, attacking their parents, OCD to the point that they can't even get out of bed. It's very common for the PANS PANDAS to first be misdiagnosed as things like OCD, ADD, oppositional defiant, and for the parents to really end up going to a long list of doctors before it gets correctly diagnosed. Children are put on multiple psychiatric medications and never respond, and it can unfortunately take years before they find out what's really going on.
That cold is making that one.
That's normal Owen, and when we see the other Owen, we see frustration and anger, we see stubbornness, and he becomes oppositionally defiant. We're forgetful, we are unable to focus, we're disruptive at school, we don't sleep, we scream, we're bored all the time. And sometimes we can be a little bit mean. You went cut or no?
No, I can kind of feel it coming, not really, because like maybe I'm like really tired, maybe I forgot to maybe take medicine, maybe, I don't know, but.
At this point, we don't know why one child gets it and another doesn't. It is extremely common to see multiple children within one family with it. We know that there must be a genetic component. You got your panda socks on. Augie! Augie, hi! Oh. I was pursuing my PhD in history at Pitt when I had my first child, and he was born sick. He had a rare genetic disorder. And so I decided to become a doctor because I was frustrated with the way his doctors were treating me as a mom. While I was in medical school, my first child came down with PANS at the age of 3. It was misdiagnosed. And then my second child came down with it a year and a half later. They didn't get properly diagnosed until after I had graduated from residency, and I actually found out about PANS PANDAS from other moms, not from the medical world. So once the initial onset of the disorder is treated, whether we're able to do that with just antibiotics or if we have to go to IVIG, it's basically an infusion of the immune-fighting cells of blood donors. A child who wasn't able to go to school, who wasn't leaving the house, who wasn't functioning, generally gets back to being themselves and they're back out there living their lives.
At all. So you can just go wherever you want.
When the condition is untreated, it can cause permanent problems. PANS PANDAS is still considered a relatively new diagnosis within the medical community. Are you feeling okay? Yeah. You look very pretty.
My husband was commuting downtown, and on the T, he was reading the Wall Street Journal, and there was an article about pandas. And he called me up and he said, "This is Owen." I mentioned it to the pediatrician and was disregarded.
Teachers and school psychologists and primary care doctors aren't very familiar with the condition. And so for that reason, there can be a lot of skepticism on their part, even accepting that the child has it. A lot of times they want to blame the symptoms on the child's behavior because they're not understanding and accepting that actually their brain is inflamed and they do not have control over the symptoms. So even kids who have been treated and are back to baseline, most of them will still, when they get sick, have what we call flares, where the symptoms will return.
Do I need to consider homeschooling him? How do I do that and work too? Do you let him go to a birthday party? There might be sick children. We're trying not to keep him in too much of a bubble, but still to protect him from unnecessary exposure or stress that may trigger him to go into a flare. Keep questioning the doctors, and if you think something isn't right, you have to trust your instinct. So you have to just keep pushing, and that's how we got to Dr. Spar. And within 2 weeks, we saw improvement. Within 30 days, I emailed one of his teachers to say, "I think I have my kid back."